Libya is in a current state of statelessness, and also in these small cities controlled by ISIS, or parts of the cities controlled by ISIS, there is that same sentiment. No functioning banks, no functioning hospitals, and a general erosion of the state. There are small cells of groups that have pledged allegiance to Tanzim al-Dawla, Islamic State as we call it, and they're present in Derna, Benghazi, in central Libya, in Sirte and the outskirts of Sirte, and Sabrat, and possibly also a few individuals in Tripoli. They're small groups. We're talking about hundreds of people, and mainly at the moment confined to the northern coast and slightly below.
Claudia Gazzini, you've been covering the rise of Islamic State in Libya, at least that's what the world is saying about it. As Crisis Group, how are you able to research Islamic State? Are you able to talk to them? What do the areas they rule over feel like?
Well, we've talked to individuals who live in these cities or towns where they are present. The areas that they control and where they live feel as anarchic as the rest of the country, I must confess.
When you talk to these representatives claiming to represent IS, what's their vision? What are they trying to get across to you?
The reasons why they've pledged allegiance, of course, becomes a topic of conversation. The idea that comes across is often that of, they're fighting against the current Libyan state, which they consider to be an un-Islamic, a kafir state, and therefore they're fighting against the state and its institutions, namely the military, the police, and the court system, the justice system. And they're also trying to debunk the economic base of the current Libyan state. So remove revenues, oil, banks, from the state in order to weaken the current state. There's no doubt that the local component is the major component of these groups, and in this sense, these groups are tapping on pre-existing jihadist sentiments that exist in Libya since the Gaddafi days. I mean, it's not a novel thing. Libyan jihadists have fought wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan over the past 20 years, and so there is already this base in the country. But we are seeing some envoys, foreign envoys from Islamic State in Raqqa, and namely, a Yemeni chief, actually two Yemeni chiefs who apparently over the past 6 months have joined these groups, who then have become Islamic State in Libya.
And of course the symbolism of the execution of those 21 Egyptian Christians was clearly an attempt to align with the Islamic State franchise. What do you think that the Libyan Islamic State faction was trying to do with that? They must have known that that would trigger a major reaction from Egypt and the outside world.
It's very unclear what the strategy was. Certainly what the video of the killing of the 21 Copts prompted was a major sense of fear from outside powers allied to Libya and from some Libyans themselves. I think they could have tried to send a message to Egypt not to interfere in Libyan affairs. At the moment, Egypt is one of the strongest partners of one of the two rival governments, the Tobruk-based government, and is pushing very much this government and its military allies to carry out an ongoing military confrontation with radical groups.
So a game of mirrors in Tripoli, but there's no doubt that the Egyptians did react. If Islamic State was trying to dissuade Egypt, it didn't work. Egypt is striking Islamic State positions. with other outside players. What impact is having on the Islamic State? Is that pushing them back?
Well, so far, Egypt has only carried out one bombing campaign. That bombing didn't have a substantial effect in damaging the Islamic State, also because it's not clear that these independent cells are actually linked to one another. And of course, I mean, there's the risk that rather than defeating IS by carrying out these strikes, you might actually be fostering more support for them. Because in the case of Derna, you know, some of the bombs fell on residential areas. There were some kids who were also killed. So there's always the risk that more people will actually take sides with Islamic State or other groups, similar groups, rather than supporting a campaign that ends up killing also civilians as a side effect.
We have continued working this morning, and we will continue working this afternoon on the substantial issues.
Well, the problem at the moment is that Libya is internally divided. So it's not divided along the lines of, you know, anti-Islamic State or anti-radical groups versus radical groups. The divisions are very different. It's an east-west division that sees two governments aligned against each other and two military coalitions aligned against each other. So as long as this military confrontation continues, there's very little chance that local military forces will be able to contain or actually move against the Islamic State, because there's always going to be another enemy that is the more immediate threat, right? So in order to start healing these divides, outside powers actually need to stop supporting one faction or the other, because even the Tripoli coalition has its allies, and outside powers need to foster a feeling of mutual trust that will enable peace talks that are currently underway to succeed. But talks in themselves are not enough. As we stated in our recently released crisis group report, more has to be done. Talks in and of themselves are not enough, because as long as the two warring parties have access to funds and to weapons, they will not have an incentive to reach a political agreement. So it is essential that the funding and the military support to both factions, Tripoli, Tobruk, be stopped in order to dry out all the resources that these two factions have.